For your hand-constructed project, you will create a cylinder vase that is 10 to 12 inches tall, wet, in the unfired stage, 10 to 12 inches. Surface decoration is an important part of the project. Equal time should be given to the construction and decoration of your project. You will post an image of this project on Canvas under the Hand Constructed Project tab. Before you begin, take a look at the PDF that has some additional instructions and some images that will hopefully inspire you. Go on Pinterest, search the web, find some images of vases that you like, and print those out or have the images so that you can view them on your computer. Here I just have some printed out. I just like that shape. I like some of the surface decoration. I want to do some sgraffito. Maybe you took some slip home and you can do sgraffito. If not, there are other ways that you can decorate your piece. I did a sketch here, so I liked the shape of this vase, but I wanted something a little more untraditional with multiple necks on it. So I know what I want to do. I know about how tall I'm aiming for. It's good to think about, how wide compared to how tall your piece is. Well, if I'm just thinking about the body here, it is just about as tall as it is wide. It's kind of a circle in just the body there, and then these necks kind of come out of there. So if this is going to be 11 inches, it's going to be 11 inches there. That means the bottom is probably going to be about that big. So consider that as you're working. As you begin, you're determining the size of the bottom of your piece, and the bottom of your piece will determine how big the top of it is, really, if it's in proportion to your plan. One way that I can control that is by creating a base for my piece that I build it in, sort of an armature that will contain the walls of your piece so that it doesn't get too big. A wire tool is good for cutting the clay. If you don't have that, your knife will work just fine. And I'm going to start with a good sized chunk that will be my armature. Always want to close up your bag of clay when you're not using it so it doesn't dry out. And I usually twist that, and then I'll turn it upside down that way. So I got my clay here, and I can kind of squish it, roll it in my hands. I can roll it on the table. And I want a nice even shape. And I decided my base was going to be about that big, somewhere in there, and this is going to support that, right? So I need to make this just a little bit bigger than how I want my bottom to be. So get that as even as you can without kind of obsessing on it. Just get it in the ballpark. We may as well get some slips started. So I'm going to get my container, plastic container here, and I can just break up some little chunks of clay into that container. And then get some water, a little bit of water in there, and then just start mashing it up. Maybe that's a little bit long. I think this is about how I want it to be. Right about there, so I can cut it straight down all the way through. Remove this end, remove this end. Now it lines up just right. Score it. Add a little bit of slip. You don't want to add too much slip at this stage because it can get really moist. And it's already moist. And you want it to kind of hold its form. So now that I have this shape, I want to clean it up a little bit and make it pretty symmetrical, because that's gonna support my sculpture. That's good enough. That's pretty round. my vase will kind of come up here. Because if I don't have this support here, then as I'm building my vase, it'll start to sit down on the sides and get wider and wider and wider. And before you know it, it's going to be this wide instead of this wide, how you started it. This keeps it from squishing outward. I'm going to have a little piece of paper in there that I can use to keep the clay from sticking to itself. Not absolutely necessary, but that helps to keep this clay from sticking to the clay that you're going to put inside of it. And if you have a board, that's good. If you have like a book or something you can set it on, that's good. Because you're going to want to kind of rotate it as you're working, and this will allow you to rotate it. If you have a banding wheel, Lazy Susan, something like that, that's ideal, but this is fine. And I'm going to start with a pinch pot. If your piece is really flat on the bottom, you might start with more of a slab. Any part that sticks out, I'm going to whack it until I get it into a nice ball shape. The goal is to get a really nice ball. Any spots that have kind of creases and stuff in them, I'm going to smooth those out. Then I'll stick my thumb in there, going straight down like I'm going straight through the ball of clay, and I'm going to do little pinches and rotate. Pinch and rotate, pinch and rotate. And I want to get this down to about a 1/2 inch in thickness. Once I can get 2 thumbs in there, I'll do that. Make sure not to pinch too hard. Better to take your time and go slow and avoid getting uneven spots. And you can add clay and kind of patch it up if you need to, but it's better to just do it once and do it right than have to fiddle with it too much. Down here, it's always going to be thicker unless you got super long thumbs. So you got to thin out that bottom part, and you do that by pushing against your palm and rotating. And you're aiming for a certain shape, right? It's the bottom of the vase. It's going to fit in there. It's going to be that wide. So it's got to open up a little bit more. So it's kind of a balance. You know, when it's thin, it feels light and elegant, but if it's thicker, it's going to be stronger. All right, that's good. Put that in there. Nice when it goes all the way down to the bottom. You know what? This could get just a little bit bigger. This could get a little bitty bit bigger. You always want to rotate as you're working if you're keeping your sculpture symmetrical. There we go. That's a little better. Put the paper in there. It's nicely in there. Now it's getting down. Yeah, now it's touching the bottom, so that's good. The next thing I want to do is start rolling out some coils. And I'm going to cut off some chunks of clay that are about size of a fist, a little bigger than a fist. Some people like thicker coils. Some people like thinner coils. The advantage to a thinner coil is maybe you're building it a little more carefully, a little more incrementally, maybe more likely to get even walls. The advantage to a thicker coil is you're getting more done at once. You're covering more area. So you want to make sure that your coil is long enough to go all the way around your pot. And it is. Good. You do want to focus on making them as evenly as you can without, fussing on them too much. So with your coils, if you are adding them really, on the outside of your shape, you're going to be building out. If you add them right on top, then you're going up. If you go on the inside, then you're going to go in. And right now I kind of just want to go up. So I'm gonna stack it right on top and do my little cutting trick. Cut through, score. And I got my slip already on my fork here. Don't need to get it too sloppy here because I don't want it to become wet and soft and weak. So don't need a lot of slip, but good to score more than you think you need. Do lots of scoring. And then plop it on there and make sure that's sticking together. You know what? I'm gonna have to kind of lift it up a little bit just so I can get my fingers in here and smush that down, smush that down. Really smush it together. It doesn't matter really if you go up or down. Get on the inside. I like to use my knuckle in there. Smooth it. A wooden rib can work really well for this. Really working that outside to compress it together. Thinning out those walls. So here I can kind of pinch it and rotate, thinning out the walls as I'm going up. Don't go too thin. About a ½ inch is what I'm going for. Now if you get really good at this, you could go a little thinner, but we need to have some structure. Need it thick enough to have a little structure to it. Making sure those walls are nice and even. All right. Think about the anatomy of a vase. Vases usually have a foot. Maybe they have some kind of waist or maybe more of a belly, depending on that shape, whether it goes in or out. They're going to have a shoulder. They're going to have a neck and a lip. Are you incorporating all those parts together in your vase? Maybe yours is straighter and it doesn't have as much of a shoulder. Maybe it just has a neck and a lip. But consider those components. Which parts match? Does the lip match the foot in any way? It's nice when they do because then it has sort of a beginning and an end and they relate to each other. It kind of gives it a sense of completion. And also it's important to have a nice lip. You want to have a good looking lip. The lip is going to talk about the vase. It's going to say, if it's a nice looking lip, it's going to say, I'm a beautiful vase. I'm light and elegant and graceful. Or if it's messy and thick, it's going to say, I'm a sloppy vase. I am heavy and misshapen and poorly built. But even if your vase is heavy and not built that well, if it has a nice lip, it's going to look as if it's built well. We're going to continue to build upward. Maybe it's going to start coming in a little bit, but I'm going for sort of a ball shape. Yeah, I'll probably come in ever so slightly here. Score well, score more than you think you need. Use my knuckle on the inside. Let's pull it out and look at that shape. So if I look at how wide it is compared to how tall, oh wow, I really want to start bringing it in. I should have brought it in a little bit already. So I'm going to start rounding that out. That's the tendency. It always wants to get big. And be careful, look, if I set it down, it's just going to start squishing. It's going to want to squish and open up. So be careful setting it down. Generally, if you set it down, you want to do it like that. Set it on the lip and keep this from getting too flat. I'll flatten it out eventually, but I want to avoid flattening it out too much. While I've got it out here, maybe I'll start to smooth it out a little bit more. A little more shaping, a little more making it a clean, symmetrical shape here. Somehow one side already got taller, but that's fine. We'll fix that. Your metal rib is going to be really good for this type of smoothing. I could even do some shaping with a paddle or a book at this stage if I needed to. So, got a little taller than we wanted. We want to start bringing it in. Here's a little trick to help solve that. I'm going to mark both sides straight across. And then I'm going to cut a dart. I just kind of went for it, but you might want to measure it a little bit first. I'll score that with a little bit of slip. And then I'll do my same V over here. See how much it brought it in? Now the best thing to do with a seam like that, it's gonna want to kind of come apart, and if you can compress it right there, compress the seam, and then using some of the clay that you just cut out of there, because it's going to be the same moisture level, score it, little slip on there, and add it right back in there. And if you get cracks later on, that's how you can fix a crack, like before it's bone dry, certainly. If it's in the leather hard stage and you get a crack, you can do the same thing. Add it right on there. So you're compressing it. The clay is made of tiny little particles, and when you squish those particles, they become closer together, they become denser and stronger. I'm going to thin out these walls a little bit. I'm going to get a little bit thinner just to keep the weight nice. And I'm getting close to actually being able to close this up. So I want to address the inside a little bit. I could use this rib. I like this rib better, so I can get in there easier. And just kind of smooth it out. Even if people can't completely see what's going on in there, you want it to look nice in there. So I went round on my shape. You don't have to go so round. Maybe you want more of a cylinder. In that case, you'd build straight up. It can be a good idea to take a break from it and let it stiffen up a little bit so it can hold its weight, because the more weight you start adding up here, the more it's going to put pressure on your piece and make it want to kind of squish down. Maybe I'm only going to leave it for a couple hours while I do something else. You can put plastic just around the lip, and that can keep the lip from getting too dry, but you can let the rest of it kind of stiffen up. Down here with the kind of clay on clay, it's not gonna dry out all that much, and you do want it to dry out down there, so maybe you get some more paper, because the paper is going to absorb moisture. Maybe you put a bunch of paper in there. go. Now the paper is going to help soak up some of that moisture. This plastic will keep it from drying out at the lip. I don't want to leave it like that for more than a few hours because it could easily get too dry. So if you're done working on it for the day, then you'll want to take some plastic and wrap the whole thing up. I left it loosely covered for about 18 hours or so. Air could still kind of get in underneath the plastic, and I left the rim wrapped up so it would stay nice and moist. And it stiffened up a little bit. Ideally, it would have stiffened up a little bit more. So I'm going to keep building upward and looking at the shape that I'm kind of going for. I cut those darts in. I'm going to bring it in and close it off. So I'm going to keep rolling out some coils. Add a coil on there. Bring it in tighter. Get my fork with a little slip on it. Always score around the edges. And now that things are a little stiffer, I'm going to use a little bit more slip. Take out a little bit more. This time you notice that coil is really going on the inside, because I want to build it inward. I'm closing off the inside now, and I spent some time in the last session smoothing that inside really well, and that's good. You always want to address the inside. Even if the viewer's not totally going to see in there, whoever uses this vessel is not going to see all the way in there. It'll function better, it'll have more integrity if the inside is properly addressed. Now before I close it off all the way, I want to make sure that I don't need to get in there to do more shaping. Always a really good idea to step back from your piece and get a good look at it. So what I like about this vase is it really kind of gracefully comes out and has a real roundedness to it. Mine's kind of like that, but could be a little more symmetrical. Definitely needs to come in more on the top. Now that it is a little bit stiffer, I'm gonna set it on its bottom because it needs to get kind of a flat spot, but I'm just gonna be careful not to let it get too flat. I need to keep kind of monitoring how much it's sagging into the table because it is gonna do that just a little bit at least. One thing I could do is do some paddling on the bottom. Looks like it's bulging out more this side than this side. Maybe I'll get inside of it and use my rib a little bit. It's not always good to make a mess, but I have some dry chunks here, and just by putting them underneath where my board is, that's going to help it rotate. Got a little bit of a dent there for my armature, so I want to make sure not to leave that. And before I close this thing off, just want to make sure that I don't need to get in there and use my rib anymore. It's okay to add a little tiny bit of clay without scoring, but definitely want to be careful when you're adding clay. Because especially if you put wet clay on some clay that's already dried out quite a bit, then it's not going to stick very well. It'll look like it's going to stick, but they're going to shrink at different rates, and that clay that you added might crack off or even trap some air in there and explode off in the kiln. Clean up the bottom a little bit. So I want this intentionally off center a little bit with the neck coming out over here, and then some smaller necks there. Yeah, so right there. So here I'm going to close it, and then I can score this. Add some clay. It's good to have a little bit of clay sitting out while you're working, not your whole bag, but just a little bit sitting out while you're working, so that it can stiffen up and be the same moisture level when you attach it. Having this at the right moisture level now is really important. You may need to stop and take a break if this is too soft. If it's too soft to support the weight of an object, of some clay protruding out of it. I'm still using my slip here. I'm dipping my fork in my slip, and this is going to come way in. Smooth it out real good on the inside. Really want that to come in. It's going to get thinner. I can get this level. Once you get real skinny like this, it seems kind of silly to just stack a bunch of tiny coils there. So I'm going to show you a way that you can work a little bit more efficiently. Got a little piece of clay here that I'm going to use. And this is going to be, looking at my image, this spout is going to be about almost as tall as the body, not quite as tall. And it's going to get wider, so I'm just going to try and make a nice clean shape. And then I'm going to take a pencil and really carefully shove it straight through. A little uneven, but we'll make it work. Rolling it and just stretching it open a little bit. Now I'll get my wooden modeling tool in there. And tore right there, that's okay. I'm gonna just compress it. Add a little clay right there. Compressing is the most important thing. And then I'm gonna score it. Score this. Add a little clay. A little bit of a thin spot there. Score it. Add a little bit of clay. Check it as I'm working on it. And yeah, that's definitely going in the right direction. Trying to get this pretty thin. Try to get it even. Got a little uneven. And then by kind of working it with your thumb, stretching it with my thumb, thinning it, and by working it like that with my thumb, I can make it kind of a nice graceful shape. Looks like I got a little kind of seam happening in there, so I'm gonna smooth it out. Maybe I'll need to add a little more clay in there. That's nice, I like that. Maybe I'll cut this a little bit so they line up nicely. Sometimes it's nice if it has a little overlap, and that can help it attach better. If it's just sitting right on there, it'll probably be okay. Yeah, that'll be okay. But a little overlap can give it a stronger connection. Smooth it together, make it look like they belong together. They are one, they become one, flowing seamlessly into one another. Eventually I'm gonna cut it at an angle, but I want my two other spouts to be at the exact same angle. That's gonna help kind of create some more unity in this form. So I'll just leave it for now, and then once I have my other two, then I'll cut them at the same time. I'll make these spouts the same way, and this clay is a little bit leather hard, still wet, but getting towards leather hard, and so it should connect well to my slightly stiff pot. And then maybe I'll make my last one at the same time, just to make sure that they really look similar, that they look like they really belong together. And I want them to get progressively smaller as they go down. So I'll get a smaller piece of clay. Carefully poking that pencil in there. Roll it a bit. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's about what I want. And then I'll open it up a little bit so it transitions into the body of the vase. And then open it up so it has a little bit of flare on the top. Yeah, it should be kind of close to give enough room. These are kind of in relationship to one another. So yeah, it does need to be quite tight on this guy. And I want it to be a little taller, so maybe I'll add a little bit of clay right here. Smooth that. There we go. So I added that little tail on there so that it connects better. Then I'll cut a little bit off of here. Then my last one will be down there. This end's a little thicker, so maybe this will be where it attaches to the pot. And then same thing, I'll probably add a little bit of clay there. I like to roll coils on my forearm, like little tiny ones. It works really well. Cut that a little bit more. And might need a little more room for this one. I don't want it to look like it's kind of hanging off the edge. I want it to look like it's well incorporated into the form. So maybe this one moves up. Don't want them to look too crowded either, but I think that'll do. Yeah, those look about good to me. So now let's get a look over the top and see if they line up. Do they need to move back? So once you know where you want them to be, we can trace them, and then we need to poke a hole. poke a hole, and then that's where it's going to attach, all around there. I'll score that and add some slip. Score it and add some slip. This one's going to go right here, and I want to really make sure to smooth it well there before I add the other spout, because it'll be hard to get in there after that other spout is there. You can use a pencil to get in there and smooth it, or my chopstick tool with the sanded edge, this edge, the pointy edge, whatever tool can reach in there. Smooth that together. You can kind of compress it a little bit in there. Needle tool. Test it a little bit. Feels pretty good. Never too late to make adjustments, because the most important thing is that it looks good, that your aesthetic impulses are telling you that things are where they should be, that it is a compelling, interesting, and beautiful composition. Add a little coil in there, give it a little more strength. So good to compress that first. I compressed it first, getting inside of there, and then I'll add another coil for strength and also to get a cleaner transition. Maybe just aesthetically I want to fill this in a little bit more. Alright, I think I'm ready to add my third spout. Maybe I'll move this hole up just a little bit. Just don't want it to look like that spout is getting crowded off of the side of the vase. Smooth it together. Add a little bit more clay in there. Smooth it together. Now it looks like this could use a little bit more clay in there to fill it in aesthetically. It'll also help reinforce it. Fill that in, a little spot right there. I'm about ready to cut these, so I'm going to cut them all at an angle, kind of like that. In fact, maybe this needs to go up a little bit more. You know, one thing here, actually, this lip is getting really kind of dry, and rather than scoring it and adding slip, one thing I really encourage people to do is to really reactivate that surface. And by that I mean, if I add water, so I have a sponge that I just moistened, and then really scoring it, now I'm actually creating slip on the surface of the clay, and that way I'm really reactivating the clay so that the slip is integrated into the clay. If you put slip onto a surface that's too dry, sometimes it just doesn't really soak in and you're not making a good connection. So that's really the best way to attach anything is to reactivate the surface. And that mostly goes for, when you're at least a couple days in on your project and it's begun to stiffen up. Mark it. Always good to measure twice, cut once. I'm going to clean up these lips because the lips talk. They tell us about the rest of the pot. They tell us if it's a nice, thin, aesthetically pleasing, clean pot, or if it's a sloppy, poorly constructed pot. So you want a real clean lip on there. And I moistened these real good. I'm going to kind of work it around with my fingers. Timing is crucial on this because this is stiff enough to hold the weight. But now I've re-moistened the lips so that they're much more shapeable. This has kind of an odd lumpiness to it right there, so I'm going to cut a little bit of that off. Just so the whole thing feels kind of on the same plane. Don't want to spend too much time on one of them because I want them to all sort of develop together. Good time to take a step back from it and look at it and just make them try and look like successively smaller versions of the same thing. Just wet my fingers. Do some shaping. Gotta open this up a little bit more. It's a little thick, but it also could be a little taller. So I'm just gonna try and stretch it upward. It's important to work on different parts all at the same time, kind of working your way around the piece, not spending too much time in one area, because the sculpture, the vase, is a sum of its parts, and you want all those parts working together. You want them to all create a unity, create a harmony. Okay, now that I got the rims, the lips mostly figured out, I'm gonna do some more smoothing, and then I'll come back to the lips at the end and just do a final kind of smooth out touch up. Some people like to smooth with a sponge, and that's okay. That can work. Just be careful not to get it too wet. And what happens if you smooth a lot with a sponge is that you remove a lot of the soft clay, leaving the thicker particles. So you're kind of washing away those finer particles and leaving the more coarse particles. And it can get kind of a sandy texture, and that's not terrible, but just be aware. Now I can use a paintbrush and clean up some of these details. Still looks like I could put a little clay in there. Now I can take a look at it and see if it looks straight. Looks like it could lean just a little bit to the left there. Make sure you look all the way down at the bottom and clean it up down there. And then one of the last things I want to do is address the rim again. And just kind of work it around. done building it. It's still pretty moist, so I'll let it stiffen up just a little bit before I put the plastic on it, because I don't want to mess up those lips and those necks that are so fragile now as they're wet. And then I'll wrap it up tight, and then I'm going to do some sgraffito work on it. I've got some slip. You could use an underglaze for sgraffito if you don't have slip. Build up a few layers, and I'll scratch through it and do some surface decoration.